Hi! Let's talk about chunk loading. Chunk loading in Minecraft is a useful feature because it solves a few problems for us. It allows our machines to work when we are not there. It prevents machines from breaking when Minecraft disables certain features because you left the chunks where they are. Also, it prevents your contraptions from breaking because of bugs in Minecraft, and yes, I do consider the fact that unloading and loading a chunk doesn't restore the exact same state to be a bug. It's like if your word processor replaced all your commas with question marks when you save and load a document and then just shrugged their shoulders and said, hey, punctuation is punctuation, deal with it. Or for that matter, let me show you. How about a chunk that forgot to save its light state? The only thing I did here is to leave and come back multiple times, and Minecraft got confused, and now I have two dark chunks. The other ones were dark too, but I tried to fix them with, well, limited success, as you can see. This is also a bug caused by incorrect chunk loading and loading, and nobody can convince me that this is correct behavior. Chunk loading also allows us to load things that would otherwise not be loaded. This is useful for things like mob switches that will load mobs to fill up mob cap and turn off spawning. And probably there are some other crazy ideas that I haven't seen or heard of yet or thought about yet that will be made possible by being able to load chunks. Now, those of you who have followed my Let's Play series know that I've been playing around with chunk loading quite a bit. I've designed a chunk loader here. I will showcase it to you in a second, but let's go through some theory in case some of you don't know what I'm talking about. Let's start by talking about what chunks are and what they are good for. You can enable viewing chunk borders by pressing F3 and G, and then you can see borders like this. And what's going on is that the entire Minecraft world is divided into 16 by 16 areas. This whole area, the column from the bottom of the world to the top of the world, is loaded or not loaded at the same time. And the reason for that is that it is completely impossible for a Minecraft server to have the entire world loaded and doing things at the same time. There is no computer big enough for this on Earth at this moment, at least. Minecraft has to decide which chunks are loaded and not loaded. Around the player, you have a setting somewhere under graphics or on the server side that tells how much of the world should be visible. On servers, this is typically 10 chunks. So if you're standing in some chunk like this, 10 chunks that way, 10 chunks that way, and a square like this is loaded around you. There are some details, but let's not get into the details too much. I will talk about them when we talk about chunk loading. The spawn chunks are special, and let's not speak about them. And yes, if you have seen my video about spawn chunks, I was wrong. Spawn chunks do process redstone when you're not in the overworld. It's just that block entities that get broken, which means that hoppers, droppers, and even blocks moved around by pistons break. And this is a unique state that can only happen in spawn chunks, where we process redstone but do not process droppers or hoppers or pistons. This is why machines break in more interesting ways in the spawn chunks than any other chunk. Now, what does a chunk loader do? A chunk loader ensures that a certain area of the game is loaded permanently, even when there is no player nearby. In this case, and I believe most chunk loaders that exist in 1.16, the chunk loader loads this chunk and then a square of one chunk to each side. These are fully normal chunks where everything works normally as you would expect it to work. So redstone works, entities work, minecarts work, mobs can be moved around, everything is the way it would be next to you. Then there is another layer of one chunk wide, also a square, where redstone works but entities are not processed, so you can't move minecarts, you can't move mobs, you can't do things like that. And there is a third layer which is also a square and one chunk wide, where things are loaded, but no redstone is processed and no entities are processed. And the very short version for why this is good for you is that you can put a mob switch here, so you can have mobs here that are loaded by the chunk loader, and they will still count towards mob cap if you do it correctly, of course, and they will not be able to move, they will not take any server performance, and this is basically the best place to put mobs for a mob switch. But for most contraptions, you will be interested in the innermost 3x3 area of chunks that are loaded by a chunk loader. Now, how do chunk loaders work in 1.16? We use the fact that if you send an item through a nether portal, it will load the area on the other side for 15 seconds. So if you send an item back through the portal in the other direction, within 15 seconds, you will load the overworld side. And now the overworld can send an item, and we continue doing this. If we do it more often than every 15 seconds, this area will stay permanently loaded and the other side will stay permanently loaded as well. Most chunk loaders currently use items. So you could either shoot the items through the portal with a dropper, but this is not perfectly reliable, because very often you will end up in a situation where the items don't fly straight. Droppers are notoriously bad at aiming, or maybe they're very good at aiming, but they just don't want to aim straight. So the items can end up pretty much all over the place. So not only would you need hoppers on one side in quite a lot of places, but you would probably also need hopper minecarts under a portal frame, and it becomes a little bit bulky and annoying setup. Now, if you've watched my Let's Play series, I designed a chunk loader based on minecarts, where we would get minecarts coming through the portal, get broken by a cactus, and then shot out from a dispenser on the other side. The reason why we need to break the minecart and then pick it up with a hopper and then dispense it from a dispenser is that an item that has gone through a portal may not pass through that portal again within 15 seconds. There is a cooldown. And by breaking the item down into its item form, passing it through a hopper and then dispensing it again, we are resetting that cooldown. This works well with minecarts, this works well with normal items as well, but that means that either you need to break the entity down to item form and shoot it out again, or you need to have the entity stay in one dimension for more than 15 seconds before you can send it back. This means that we can't really use minecarts that have hoppers or chests or furnaces in that kind of setup, because when they break down with a cactus, they break down into two items, the minecart item and, say, the hopper item. And without auto-crafting, which I didn't want to use in this situation, this is impossible to handle. So if we want to build a little bit more complicated system like this with minecarts with furnaces, and yes, I tried to do a legitimate use for minecart with furnaces, and they work perfectly for this. They're actually less laggy than minecarts with hoppers. They're the same lag as minecarts with chests, so you could use minecarts with chests, but this is a minecart with furnace chunk loader because I wanted it that way. If we want them to not pass through the portal for 15 seconds, we need to have two minecarts on this side and two minecarts on the other side that we store in a way before we send them to the other side. So how does this thing work? Let's turn it on and see what happens. Every 15, or rather every 12 seconds, this clock will open this fence gate just long enough to let one of these minecarts through. It goes through the portal. There is a very similar machine on the other side that sends one minecart back. And if we watch the minecart come back here, it goes here, goes to this little contraption where the minecart is thrown up, it lands on this scaffolding, turns around here, and lands in our little buffer here. this buffer contains 2 minecarts. Let's go to the other side to see how this works. And here we see the minecart come through, and as soon as this detector rail activates, one thing it does is to throw the minecart up on the scaffolding, and the other thing it does is to send a signal to open this fence gate just short enough. This is the entire system on the Nether side. It doesn't have to be the Nether side. You could of course have the clock on the Nether side and the return setup on the Overworld side. It's your choice. This is just more convenient in most cases because I want to have my switches on the Overworld side. This little contraption here with the piston shooting the minecart up through the scaffolding has been shown to me by Boyan on my Discord server. It works on the idea that scaffoldings are a little bit special. They have a hitbox from above, but they don't have a hitbox from below, which means that the minecart doesn't collide with the scaffolding on the way up, but as soon as it comes over here, it will land on the rail. And it's just very elegant. And here we just store 2 minecarts, just like we did on the other side. Unfortunately, I am nudging the minecarts when I'm moving around, so I might have just broken the machine. As we can see when I went through the portal, you should definitely not be doing things like getting near this when it's running, because if you push the minecarts and they are stored here, things get out of alignment. And yeah, we can see that I nudge this minecart so it's on this block and will no longer go through. Now, why am I using a system this complicated rather than breaking a normal minecart on a cactus and shooting it with a dispenser? The problem that we're trying to solve is that zombified piglins can always spawn in a portal. I am not aware of any mechanism to prevent that from happening. This means that if you have a zombified piglin spawn here, and a minecart is going through it, it will pick up the zombified piglin will be in the minecart, and the minecart can no longer pass through the portal, and that seizes up the system. If we have a furnace in the minecart, or a hopper, or a chest, this can no longer happen. We still have a problem with zombified piglins spawning here, and they will prevent the minecart from going through the portal. The next minecart will bump that one and the system should unclog. I have been running this one for basically around 50 hours and it hasn't had any problem. I have been running also 2 of these in my survival Let's Play world, and they have been behaving well, and I have seen zombified piglins spawn. I have definitely seen zombified piglins spawn here. And just to lower the risk of this happening, we have a little setup here with a turtle egg where the zombified piglin wants to just run to the turtle egg, and they fall down here, and if we want, we could kill them, or we could just leave them alone and they will despawn. That's not a big deal. You should probably be able to see everything you need to know about this setup from just looking here. There isn't really much to it. The clock has 32 items, because that seems good enough. You could probably have a couple more and it should be fine. You could probably have a couple less and that shouldn't affect performance either. The performance of this system, I can't even measure it. It's 0.3 MSPT in the worst case, and it's probably much better than that. So that is not an issue. I would recommend you to build the Overworld side and do not build the Nether side until you've sent 1 minecart through. And that is because you might not always predict the correct direction where the minecart should end up. If we look at this, when I'm going through the portal to the north, I am back to the north here, and that should always be true, but when you turn the portal around, magical things happen. It should still be possible to build the chunk loader where one of the portals is looking north-south and the other one is east-west, but you definitely need to do some testing and make sure that the minecarts end up on the right side of the portal and which side they exit. And yes, I am saying that because in one of the experiments I've done, I built this entire side on the wrong side, and then I was confused why nothing was working. Another thing worth noting is that when you're experimenting with chunk loading and the way I'm doing this here in a creative single player world, and for example you have an iron farm that you want to chunk load, yes, this iron farm is chunk loaded and it's working just fine, but beware, and this cost me half a day of debugging trying to figure out why my iron farm isn't working. If you have Optifine, go to video settings, go to performance, and disable smooth world. The description here says removes lag spike. No, it doesn't remove lag spike. It completely ruins which chunks are loaded and which chunks are not loaded, and nothing will work. This iron farm, or any other iron farm I'm pretty sure, will not work if you have Optifine in a single player world with that setting enabled. With that setting disabled, which doesn't affect performance whatsoever, at least not that I can see, the iron farm works fine. The world download for this showcase will not contain this world. And the reason for that is that while we can make a super flat overworld, I have not been able to find, and I don't think there is, a setting to make a super flat nether. So since this farm has to have a nether side and an overworld side, I cannot make a functional world download that is also within reasonable size. This never generates huge. So instead, we will have this world. And this is the overworld side of the chunk loader, and this is the nether side. And like I said, you could build this on the overworld side and you could build this on the nether side, but then you would have to move the egg behind this portal. And that should be it for this guide. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments and I'll explain anything I understand. But then in any case, thanks for watching and have good chunk loading. Bye!